Hi everyone, welcome to the season finale of Once a Lawyer for this year. Our guest today is the inimitable Harlaksh Singh. Harlaksh graduated from Symbiosis Law School in 2013. He also started his first venture in Pune called Turf 29 and soon after moved into the cross border investment space.
And in late 2017, Harlaksh founded the Superflow agency, a market agency whose expertise includes growth, strategy, branding, and design work for corporate organizations. Superflow has worked on over about 150 plus projects with national and international clients in the past 4 years. And he simultaneously founded Valiant Foundation in 2017, an NPO which has worked with underprivileged children and underserved urban women.
Since 2020, Harlaksh founded his next venture, 57 Capital, where he focused on bolstering internet-based micro ventures. He is also the host of the Superflow Podcast, where he discusses the rarely shared growth secrets of eminent entrepreneurs, marketeers, coaches, consultants, and agency owners from across the world. So, Harlaksh, thank you so much for being here. Hope you're feeling good about it as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for a very, I would say, uh, as is introduction. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to speak to you guys. Yes.
Okay, then Halaksh, let's get started with our conversation, and we're so excited to know a lot more about you. So to begin with, Halaksh, I believe you graduated in 2013 with a legal degree. How do you make
Yes.
such a shift from law to marketing? I mean, what was your thought process as a legal graduate to make this decision?
Okay, so it wasn't a very sudden thing. It was more of I got into law as most of us do, primarily to, let's say, have a good educational background. That's how we pushed into it. I call it it's almost like you don't know what's coming up. The industry changes so quickly, also from when I joined to when I passed out, and subsequent years. So it was an innocent sort of a decision to get into law, based on my other vile things I want to get into. I want to get into music production and this, and BMS and advertising. And back then, my parents are like have a background in banking, public sector and private sector both. So it was more of a we didn't know what else to do. This is an option that came up, and we're like, okay, let's go for it. So that was primarily how I got into it. But then once I was part of the entire thing, uh, I mean, Michael and I sort of studied around the same time. So I was very active in my sort of the sports committee, the student council, and those kind of things. And then I think I gave it a shot. It wasn't like I got into it to get out of it. It was more like I had my internship with a corporate as part of a their legal team. I did that, I think, in my third year, maybe. And then I had another internship at the Bombay High Court as well as part of a litigation firm. But somehow my experience from when I saw that was okay. I don't see myself in this setup. I don't see myself in this future overall. It wasn't. I thought it wasn't for me. Uh, Based on primarily, I felt the hierarchy like overall was quite strong in terms of how things flow, and I'm like sort of a very fiercely independent kind of a guy. So for me, it was very difficult to try and fit into something which wasn't necessarily, let's just say, at the time at least, wasn't extremely merit based, or it was a lot of basically just because there are people in this industry or in this space who are saying something that you got to do it. And that's the thing that sort of got to me. So from there on, those two experiences sort of led me to think about doing my own stuff. And anyway, I had sort of a thing that I wanted to do something on my own. So that is basically the background to then me moving into something else. So yeah.
All right. So when you started off on your own, didn't you think it would be prudent to maybe work with an organization or work under a mentor? They also add like a lot of value, right? I understand the fiercely independent part completely. I definitely
Yes.
empathize with that. Uh, but did you think at that point in time, or how did you tackle that aspect? Because when you start off by yourself, you have a lot to learn, like from scratch by yourself.
Okay, so I think it just depends on what you're looking for. Okay, what are you optimizing for, right? So people take career choices uh, for different reasons. Okay, so some people do it for the learning initially, but then they're like, okay, maybe I want to become a professional in this space. So then they do it based on that. Some people optimize for money, so they're not necessarily looking to become an expert, but they're looking to optimize for getting money overall. Some people are just looking for expression of the ideas and trying to figure out all of these things by themselves. And for me, that was the most let's just say lucrative thing for me, or the thing that popped out to me was there's excitement in trying to figuring it out yourself. At least at the time, that is how it was, and it stuck with me ever since. So I wasn't optimizing for making more money. I wasn't optimizing for becoming a professional and getting known in the space, like, as if I'm some big legal luminary or something, or even in the entrepreneurial space, like as if I'm some expert in, any of these things. And for me, it just fit perfectly fine. I mean, I think a lot of people, depending on what background they're coming into, these kinds of decisions, try to do what other people have done. And that sort of isn't necessarily what I thought was required. I went in with the approach that, okay, there's enough, my parents have worked enough. We've got a house in Bombay. I don't necessarily have to pay bills every month for like rent or student loan or whatever. So might as well use that opportunity to then try and explore and scratch my own itch.
I mean, Halaksh, of course, you proved yourself and everybody around you right, and you're running such a successful venture as well for the last 4 years. Why don't you tell us about Superflow Agency?
Sure. So Superflow. Okay. So sure. So Superflow is born out of like my own frustrations with different kinds of businesses I've been in. So like Michael said, oh, okay, would it be prudent to sort of go and learn with somebody and all of that? So while not doing that is gives you an outsider's perspective and you have a fresh perspective of everything, but there's a cost to that, right? And cost is usually in time, in a failed venture or these kind of things. So for me, it was born out of so many different ventures that I had been part of, and some of them not working out to the way I thought it, should have. And that was primarily for me down to not figuring out how distribution works overall, especially on the marketing side, on the growth side. So for me, that was the starting point of why I thought the best idea would be to actually set up a marketing firm to understand while we are still actually delivering all those services, getting to know how distribution actually works on the ground in terms of action campaigns rather than just guessworking it when you're trying to figure it out. And that's how it started. Originally, we were on the branding design side of things. That's the immediate work that we got, and that's how I got involved. There were a bunch of friends who would ask me for these kind of things. Okay, hey, how do I do this? And that was the initial portfolio. And then after that, we just went ahead and tried to sort of move into the growth side of things, which is where we are right now. So we do a lot of performance marketing stuff, which is ultimately all businesses are looking at. Just finally converting all of these impressions and clicks and all of these podcasts and all of that into actual revenue, right? Because if you can't convert, all of these things are just noise. So it's ultimately going to come down to conversion, and that's how we positioned ourselves. Is we run profitable campaigns, primarily focused on ROI. We use paid ads, funnels, email sequences, automation, and that's primarily the space that we operate in right now.
Interesting. And how big is how big is your agency right now? How many people?
Okay, so that question is interesting, right? So I think there's a big emphasis on team size overall that a lot of people sort of have traditionally gone by, and that's actually not really a good measure in 2022, right? So think of how effective the setup is versus how many people exist in a setup, because you could have inefficient, like 200 people who are inefficient versus 20 people who are efficient. So my answer to that question is we are set up in a way where we can scale up based on, let's say, if we have another 50 campaigns to do, we can scale up to that. And if we have to do, let's say, just operate at the level that we're operating, we can stick with what we have. So it's for us more about capability and the output at the end of the day, rather than trying to be like, okay, we've got like, let's say 200 people working on something. If 200 are required, fine. But the way we've tried to do it is, and this is my long-term thing, is I don't want to get into a setup which is a sort of a HR farm, if you call it, or like people farm, if you call it, which is traditionally how things have been set up. So I like to operate in a way where the team is small, the team is effective, and that gives us a lot of advantage over a lot of other people.
Right. So you essentially hire people or retain people for projects. I'm guessing that's how it works more than having a permanent large team.
I'll give you an example of this just to illustrate
Right.
this. So there are core team members that we have. We currently at about 12 people, and
Okay.
we'd like to stick with that in terms of
Right.
max. I think 2025 is like the, because we like to go higher on the qualitative side instead of the quantitative side. However, there are certain positions that you can't hire for full time. For example, in legal, for example, there are a legal counsel who's making, I don't know, 10 lakhs for a simple 30-second hearing is not going to come and work full time for a firm. So similarly in this space as well, you have a situation which is, you have people who are really good freelance copywriters, right? But you can't afford to bring them in. You really have to use them on a project basis because they wouldn't really join, right? So it's a question of, in today's sort of day and age, wherever the talent is, you'll go and find it and figure out a way to work with them instead of trying to bring everybody in house, trying to have all this control or pseudo control that everybody likes to sort of position themselves, that restrict all the things that these people can do otherwise in their, in their lives. They might want to take up multiple other projects, and they're effectively working for you as well. So I think the world is sort of changing on this front, and you're seeing it with a lot of consulting firms, and you're seeing it with a lot of where you can't possibly bring in everybody. So right now, the way we've done it is we have an in-house team, and then we have people who we bring on as specialists wherever required.
Yeah, Harlaksh. So my question would be that you spent 5 years in law school and you learned a lot inside the classroom, or you possibly learned a lot inside the classroom as well as outside the city of Pune. Um, do you think it has any impact or effect on the way you work today and the kind of work that you do?
Okay, so Michael, I have a very different take to this than most people. Everybody likes to go with a flowery language, sort of, oh, I'm very grateful to my all of that stuff. I'd like to go back as much as school and college and all that. Basically, we all the education system is not optimized for what you're going to do in your job and in your actual career for the most part, and that just causes a lot of friction because your expectations go up. Your let's say you think you know a lot because you've done what we did, what, 80 exams over 5 years, and that's a lot, right? It's to just try and figure out. But then if you try to apply all of that directly to your job, none of it makes any sense. It's like it's not really something, either from a litigation point of view, or okay, maybe a little bit here and there where you say, okay, some things like, I don't know, constitutional law, and within that then you have like all the basic stuff is fine, I get it, but then it's punishing people who can do it fast enough. So I feel 6 months to a year, actually, to be very honest, is more than enough for like in classroom studies. And then everything else after that is really a question of uh, practicing, on a, I like the articleship system that the CAs have, and I think that should be a lot more enforced into law school, where you have more time spent at work as you're doing this, rather than more time spent in the classroom trying to do assignments and all of these things. I feel it slows us down. It punishes people who are not necessarily don't need 5 years to figure all this out.
All right.
Interesting. Thank you, Harlaksh. So, in fact, like I said, you've come a long way, and it's been a very very interesting journey. 5 years of law, then 4 years of being an entrepreneur. I feel that we would like to know more about you as a leader and entrepreneur. So, Harlaksh, when you're hiring for your organization, what is it that you look for in a professional? Values, their motivations and competencies. What's your take on that?
Okay, so I've been part of different sort of, let's say, sectors, geographies, all these kind of things. I think the first thing that I look at is whether the person can actually do the job that we are going to hire for. Right, as simple as that. We don't look for anything else at the beginning, because I feel there's a lot of focus on everything else, where people are like, oh, I need to be confident, I need to be this, I need to be that, and I need to study this and prepare for the interview. But I'm like, the basic question ultimately is, okay, if I'm hiring, let's just say anyone, right? So let's say, I'm just saying, okay, Michael is going to, like, let's say we're running let's say litigation firm, and Michael is applying for, let's say, being somebody who's going to be part of the team as a junior litigator, if you may call that, right? And so the question is, what is his actual job? That's the starting point. Can he actually pull that off? Right? Can he go to court? Can he assist with research? Can he? And I think instead of this becoming and it's become, to be very honest, a big circus where people in HR are trying to hire for everything else except for the skill that is supposed to be hired for, and people are also preparing for that entire circus, right? So it's like, oh, I'm going to 5 rounds of interviews, and it's going to be all of these different kinds of it's like a very it's very fascinating to me. It's like this corporate sort of dance that's happening, where one person's teasing the other with like some question, and the other person's like, oh, I'm going to it's become more of that than actual. So hiring is very simple. Can you do the job? That's the number one thing. And then after that, of course, can you sort of problem solve whenever something comes up which is outside of what you are currently able to do, right? And I think that's it. Like, if you can hire based on just do those things, or you can apply just based on those two things, you're sorted. Okay, I think if you try to make it about other things, like as if you're going to be able to fool people by adding 20 things in your CV which don't, like, rangoli and I don't know what all people add, like I like dancing. I'm like, okay, that's all cool, right? But the reality is you're hiring for two things. Is like, can you get the job done? And if at all
If at
something
all
comes
something
up,
comes up,
yeah, if at all something comes up outside of what you can do, then are you able to figure it out within that space?
okay, say I polled your employees right now, would they say you're a tough boss to work with or an easygoing boss?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to speak on their behalf, but in general, so I mean, my style of, let's say, running something is working with the person to try and get them to learn a bunch of stuff which they earlier wouldn't necessarily know. And usually, when we hire, I like to hire people who haven't, let's just say, who have some idea or some skill set around the work that needs to be done, but not necessarily a complete picture of, they're not here to milk money, is the way I look at it, right? It's like, oh, they've gained all these 20 years of experience, and now they're like, okay, I'll do 2 hours of work, call it 8 hours of work, and then, I'm going to make money. So for me, I like to work with people who want to learn something new within, add to their skill set, add to a new understanding. So I invest a lot of time with by people in trying to get them to learn, get them to acquire new skills, and that's pretty much it. In terms of toughness, I'm not necessarily. I don't usually like. I mean, I don't usually do all of that stuff. For me, I'll take the hit in terms of the project. I wouldn't necessarily pass on the blame. So, in case I've hired wrong and we don't have the capability to pull off a project, that's my problem. It's not the issue. So I wouldn't necessarily pin anything. In case there's something very basic which we expect them to do and they haven't done, okay, we can have a conversation that, okay, hey, you're expected to pull this off. But I wouldn't want to speak on their behalf, so I'll just leave it there.
All right, all right. Okay, so over the last 10 years, I think we've seen a little bit of a shift, right? Like you said, when, like, for example, when I graduated from college, the only options were litigation, law firm, in-house counsel, right? And in-house counsel also was like a very distant third option. It was the first two primarily, right? Now you see a lot more lawyers who aren't doing law, who have chosen to like become entrepreneurs. Like on this call, there's two of us who have done it at some point in our time in our life, and I'm sure Nitika will join us sometime sooner or later. Okay. So, do you think there's a reason for this, though? I think there's a lot more lawyers right now exploring different fields, becoming entrepreneurs of their own. Like I know a few other lawyers who have started like breweries right after college, or who have gone into, let's say, dance. There's a batchmate of mine who's become like a professional dancer, for example. She has her own dance company. But these were things that when we spoke about in college, it was we were derided, we were looked at as, "Are you insane?" Whereas now, when people do it, it's actually fairly normal. It's becoming more regularized. Do you think there's a reason for that, or do you think it's a good thing? Like, what's your idea on that?
Okay, so I mean, Michael, the internet happened. Okay, as we were sitting there, social media happened, YouTube happened, Okay, we can't really close our eyes and be like, oh, we're from a legal background to this background. All that's historical legacy, right? The question is, what is the opportunity today? And it's beyond the legal space, it's beyond litigation, it's beyond corporate, it is global, it's not even, it's beyond India. So our clients are in Australia, Canada. I worked cross border. All these people are moving, when they move for the LLM, but then they end up taking a job for something else. There's so many different things happening. So the world in general has become a place where I think this is the kind of sort of education, if you really think about it, that we needed, which is more like people will get rewarded wherever, let's say, I would say action takers or people who want to go ahead and do whatever it is that they want to do will get rewarded for that in whatever space they're in, whether they come from a legal background, whether they don't come. So as far as a general trend goes, when we were in law school, there's no YouTube. YouTube's just coming up, right? Facebook's just coming. I remember my roommate was like, we were fighting between whether Orkut or Facebook is like a better platform, right? For a good 2 months, because he was on Facebook, I was on Orkut, and he's like, no, there's this cool new thing. So it's like, we've come from that point where we've seen sort of these opportunities opening up for everybody. And the question really is, how do you, going back to my first sort of question answer, which is, how do you want to, like, what are you optimizing for? Okay, are you optimizing for money? Are you optimizing for just exploring as an adventure? Are you optimizing for peace of mind, where you just want to work 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day? What is it you're optimizing for? And I think that is the lack of clarity with everybody overall, is because nobody wants to take an sort of a step in any direction, because they're like, oh, what if it goes wrong? What if I don't, what if my venture does not kick off? Then will I get a job again, and all that? So all that insecurity sort of comes back. But in general, the trend I feel is, if you're somebody who's wanting to give it a shot in any space, whether it's legal, whether it is outside legal, whatever it is, I think if you're really up for it, there's never been more opportunity, whether in India, in legal, outside legal, wherever. So that's what's happening, is more opportunity for everybody around the world.
Got it.
That's actually very rightly said, Harlaksh, and it was such an interesting conversation we had. We've prepared a small fun segment for you and for the audience to know who Harlaksh is, what are his preferences. So, a quick round of rapid fire with you. Um, 1 second. So, are you ready, Harlaksh? You can't think. You have to answer whatever comes to you first in your
Sure,
mind.
sure.
Okay, so Michael, you ready? I'm going to start. Okay, Harlaksh, alternative career if you're getting paid all day.
I wouldn't work at all.
It's the best answer so far.
Yeah. Why am I doing all this work? I'm not here to sort of work in any direction. So if I'm getting paid all day for anything, I'm just like, just forget work. I don't like it. It's just unnecessary. I would do other kinds of experiments and things that I find curiosity in overall. But no, I think work is an overrated concept. It's there to make money, and you just get out and then do other interesting stuff in life. Life is too, let's just say, interesting to narrow it down to just sitting in a cubicle or just doing one thing over and over again. I feel, for me at least personally, if I'm getting paid all day, and that's how I've actually optimized right now, that this is not work for me. So if I am interested in something else, I'll just move on. That's how it's going to be.
Got it. That's a first. We've never heard that answer before. So what do you do when you're not working? What do you like spending your personal time on?
Okay, so it's all the same time. There's no personal time, there's no work time, there's no work life balance, none of that stuff. The reason you need work life balance is because you are trying to sort of compartmentalize all these things, and that's a very sort of a westernized concept, or in general, I don't live like that. So for me, work, play, personal life, all of that is just one thing, all meshed in one. And in that entire thing, this is a predominant sort of creative expression, or generally me trying to be curious about these different kinds of things. So listen, I'm interested in all different kinds of things. There is stand up that I'm interested in. I like let's say street magic is something that I like. So I like illusionists in general. I was doing some running before this, where I went from 0 to 57 kilometers of an ultra run after my ACL reconstruction. So I'm a listen. I mean, I'm gonna if it's something which is out there to be explored and it sort of catches my fancy, I'm going to try and explore as much as I can. There's also world politics and economics and all these different kinds of things, and then life philosophy in general. What is life? Why are we all here? So I'm a very varied character, outside of work. But I just feel it's all meshed into one. I wouldn't necessarily want to segregate them.
Most interesting thing you've heard on the Superflow podcast?
I would actually say the most valuable thing has been a guy who came up on the podcast. He is somebody who's running, uh, um, he's a growth lead at one of the Elon Musk ventures, which is Synthesis School. I don't know if you've heard of that. And so he gave me a very valuable answer, which was um, that you're hired for judgment. Okay, and you're not hired for. So I was asking him a very simple question. I said, okay, how do you approach all of these different kinds of, let's say, marketing experiments? And there's so many channels like Facebook, Instagram, all of these different ways in which you could market something. So what's your, or like, how do you decide? And he's like, hey, you're hired for judgment, right? So in that entire statement, and it's a very simple statement that just went by, but then I thought about that and I'm like, yeah, that's what I hire for. That's what I pay for. That's why you go and work with somebody in a let's say in a law firm. Or how do you decide between 10 different counsels? You hire them for judgment. And so for me, the most valuable piece of let's say thing that came off from that particular episode overall, as all the episodes, was that entire simplification that, hey, you're hiring or you're working with people, or you need to be good at, you need to have that judgment of whatever it is you're trying to do.
Got it. Got it. You must, as an entrepreneur, at some point of time or the other, you must have gone through the gamut of professional speakers, motivational speakers, life coaches, and so forth available online. Is there anyone you particularly resonate with? And if you say Jay Shetty, I'm ending this podcast right now.
Okay, so uh, this is a very interesting thing. I think I started off without all of these guys. None of these guys existed in my life, and I was the best, most effective when I did not buy into all of the stuff. Okay, so
If you were to pursue the legal career, what would you have been as a lawyer? Corporate lawyer or a private practice lawyer?
okay, none as far as my experience goes. But okay, just to answer that question, I feel I'll give you a the thing about law for me is very interesting. Okay, so law is a made up thing by society overall, right? We came together, we made up some rules, and now all of us are trying to sort of let's say we're living by in society based on those rules, and it's a subjective set of things. We have some morality and law chapters I remember from my, I think, first year or whatever, and the origins of all of these things. And then we get into, it's like mathematics, right? A lot of this is like where does it all come from and where does it all go? So for me, law is something where corporate law is an optimization on money. Okay, so if I was to optimize for money, I would just go into corporate law, find a space where few people are operating in, we become good at that one thing, and then almost like if white collar was something that was coming up some years back as an area for a lot of, let's say cyber was an area that was coming up back when I was sort of finishing law. Cross border stuff that I sort of did, that was also something that was an under let's say specialized area. But today, if I was to optimize for money, I would get into one of these niche areas and do corporate law. And if I was to do private practice, I'm not a big fan in general, because I feel the legal system itself needs a big upgrade, and it's just you're dealing with the scraps of you're almost fighting the system to be able to get a basic level of justice, or basic level of, let's say, what is owed to you, or what is it that you rightfully have as your own. So I feel private practice wouldn't be for me. I would actually go ahead, if I was to do any of these things before doing private practice, I would go and try to uh, get some policies passed which actually help the legal system upgrade, and then probably go back. So I would work on public policy, like generally policy in general first, because it's a waste of time for me to spend 20 years in a system that is not really even basically set up to deliver basic justice. It should be 20 years in the policy side of things to improve. Like RTI was such sort of a byproduct of people who actually went and tried to change the system in a particular way. if I was to do it, I would probably start there. We discussed off this recording sometime, which was setting up a law school and these kind of things. Yeah, I'd probably do something on those lines. But eventually, it's all going to come down to whether legislation itself is good enough to be able to let's just say reward people who are really good at things like private practice or all these kind of things, rather than wasting their life and 20 years and just optimizing for 30 seconds in front of a judge who's like probably napping there. So I'm not a big fan of that. I feel it's something where I would optimize for money, corporate law, and then if I was optimizing for some sort of a change in society, I would go in for changing policy first, or at least working on that, and then coming to private practice.
Nice. That
Got
means you did think this through. Thank you, Harlaksh. That it was a lovely conversation.